Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. This is a podcast for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault, whether as a child or as an adult. Know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. My name is Mike Chapman. I'm a certified recovery life coach and also a survivor. Let's find hope and healing together. Hello and welcome. This week I am interviewing Ena Lucia Mariaca Pacheco, who is a researcher on male survivors of sexual abuse and trafficking. And we go into so much depth of what she has found in all of her research and her story of joining into this field. It lasted enough to make 2 parts. So join me for part 1 of this interview, and you'll hear part 2 next week. And welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. I'm your host, Mike Chapman. And with me today is Ena Lucia Mariaca Pacheco. She goes by Anita for short. And she has the honor of my first female podcast guest. There's more to that story and why I waited for her specifically. We are recording off my normal schedule, which is Tuesday evenings. That's when we normally record live with an audience. If you'd like to join us for future podcast episodes where we do record live, you can learn more about how to do so at my website, polarlifeconsulting.com/live. And let me introduce Anita to you. Ena Lucia Mariaca Pacheco, Anita for short, is a human security researcher and author with focused expertise in child sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. She holds 2 bachelor degrees from the University of Ottawa and a master's degree in Human Security and Peacebuilding from Royal Roads University in Canada. For over a decade, she has worked at the intersection of government, civil society, international organizations, and law enforcement to advanced research, policy development, and survivor-centered advocacy. Her work spans multiple global initiatives aimed at supporting victims and survivors of trafficking and child sexual exploitation. Ena Lucia has also contributed her expertise on the ground as a volunteer with non-governmental organizations operating in trafficking hotspots. During her time at the Canadian Parliament, she developed a data tracking system that supported the drafting and passage of Bill C-310, strengthening Canada's human trafficking legislation. Her research has also been used to inform the development of new bills and an act to amend the Criminal Code, Trafficking in Persons, presented before the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. An experienced trainer and international speaker, Ena Lucia has presented her research at global conferences and at the United Nations. She is a published researcher with her work featured in Child Abuse and Neglect Journal's special issue on boys. She also co-led the first international conference dedicated to violence against men and boys. She is currently preparing forthcoming research publications that further explore child sexual exploitation, trafficking, and the often overlooked experiences of male survivors, with a continued commitment to advancing survivor-informed policy, protection, and prevention. So, let me explain further. Obviously, why would I have a female on? This is my first female. She works with male survivors, not only abuse survivors, but trafficking survivors. And if you've heard my story, I've mentioned her in my story. And the most recent story where I shared my presentation from the International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference, sponsored by the University of Toledo, and I've shared that on my own podcast. I use her data from her research in my own story, and it informs my own story. If you saw the bar graphs, there was one bar graph, that huge jump compared to the general population. And boys, it just jumps that young boys are being exploited at a huge, much larger rate than the child population in general. And that was my story. And furthermore, Anita came on to Male Survivor, asked the leadership if she could interview as many survivors as possible. And she interviewed a bunch of us, including 10 of us from there and elsewhere, who were trafficked. And it was in-depth interviews. She interviewed us on Zoom over like well over a year, several follow-up interviews, getting the full story, what we've been doing for healing, and so forth, collecting those stories and then presenting them at the same conference sponsored by the University of Toledo that I've gone to for several years. And then hearing her present, including my story as part of her presentation, I just felt so seen and believed and validated. It just meant the world to me. I knew eventually I wanted to share my story at that conference as well, which I accomplished this past year in 2025. And yay. And I further had the privilege of meeting Anita in person. Soap Project sponsored a healing retreat for male trafficking survivors, and I was able to participate in that. And she helped to staff that retreat as one of several volunteer staff people to help us with our healing. So, and here's a picture of us in person. And yes, it was wonderful meeting this lovely human being in person. And I've saved the spot of my first female guest specifically for Anita. So, without further ado, before we go into her telling her story, we're going to start the podcast like we do most weeks with 4 questions.
Now it's time for 4 questions, that part of the podcast when we get to know our guest a bit better by asking a few questions. Let's go.
So, Anita, I'm so thrilled to have you on my podcast. Huge welcome. So, to start things off, what is your favorite food memory?
Before I get started, I just want to say a quick thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And oh my gosh, Mike, it was such a pleasure meeting you in person. Oh, you're such a joy, just such a joy. Like, I'm so happy we had that experience and hopefully many more in the future. And thank you again for keeping me for number 1. That was such a nice surprise to hear. And I'm just very thankful for this opportunity and to share this time with you. So let me jump right into that question. So my favorite food memories, those usually revolved around either Thanksgiving or Christmas. We had the same meals for both, but it just really brought together the entire family. And I come from a Latin American family, and so our small family gatherings are usually 30 people plus. And so it just was really, really nice. And we would have the North American Thanksgiving or Christmas, which was like the turkey and the stuffing and the cranberry sauce and the pies. And I just always loved those meals because I'm such a foodie, but I always associated it with spending time with family and getting to cook and bake with my aunts and my uncles and just kind of having that loving environment. It was really, really nice. And one of my favorite food memories is baking sugar cookies with my aunt for these events. And now I find myself using that as kind of my self-care, but also loving on people, which is now I just bake a lot of cookies.
Right.
And so I really love being able to share that with my friends now and people that mean a lot to me. And so yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know growing up, we always didn't have a lot. My mom was a single mom, if you've heard my story, for a long time. But every holiday, she'd bring out that homemade sugar cookie recipe from scratch, where the flour and sugar, throw it all together, and then homemade frosting with powdered sugar, and get the little food dye kits. And we would decorate, whether it was Easter or Halloween or Christmas or whatever. And it was just a big weekend project with all of us. We'd bake a whole bunch of cookies and then frost them all, and we'd have them as snacks leading up to the holiday. And yeah, it was always a special time with me and my sisters doing that. So yeah, a lovely memories. And then I did that with my own children when they were growing up. We would get the cookies usually at Christmas time, but yes, and decorate them, but all those sugar cookies with the different shapes cut out and so forth. So very, very happy memory.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. So, what is your favorite Christmas or holiday memory?
So going back to that Christmas like
Mhm,
theme, my family, because again, it's a lot of us.
mhm.
We would have a lot of gifts under the tree because there's a little bit for everyone. And then once we finished opening all the gifts, that was always a really nice part. But I think my favorite part was that we would have Christmas gift wrap fight. We would, as people are opening gifts, you're like slowly collecting like wrapping paper and like tissue and then just like hoarding it, and then at the end you just scrunch it up like a snowball, and then you just hit everyone with it and just throw it across the room, and it's this huge mess everywhere, and like ants getting pelted in the head with like a ball of tissue paper, and oh, it was just, we would do it every single year growing up.
Wow.
And so it just became like the favorite activity, and like it didn't just like it's leaves the room, and so you're like chasing people across the whole house, and oh, it was so fun.
Was it a large extended family that you would get together?
Um, so I'm actually the first Canadian born in my family because we are a bunch of immigrants that came to Canada. And so it would be my mother's family. And so it was, I think, a few aunts and uncles and then their children. And I was an only child. And so myself and then a few cousins would sometimes come from Costa Rica to spend Christmas with us. So like this could get to like 40.
Wow.
And we don't really have self-control when it comes with Christmas wrap or water. So we have the hugest either water fights or Christmas wrap fights, and a lot of cleaning afterwards, but it was definitely worth it.
Wow. Wow. I know. I dated a gal from a large Catholic family, which my wife also is from a big Catholic family. And Christmas was just chaotic. I think she was one of 12. And I spent one Christmas with her, and you mound of presents and then wrapping paper everywhere. And it was just, you don't have time to spend everyone slowly wrapping up. They just throw the gifts out and everyone just kind of goes through and opens up their things, and it's all chaos, organized chaos, but it's what they did. And yeah, your story reminded me of that. Interesting. She also spent time in Costa Rica on a mission trip, I believe. So it's like
Nice.
interesting, parallel. But yeah, absolutely. So what is your favorite scripture or any inspirational quote that has helped you on your spiritual journey? And what about it speaks to you?
So the one Bible verse that keeps popping up in my mind whenever I need kind of encouragement or just to like keep going on was a verse that my mom would always repeat to me when I was little. A lot of the times it was just me and her growing up. And so the verse comes from Joshua 1, verse 9, and it's, "Have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? Do not be terrified, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Especially growing up in such like a isolated area. Again, I was the first Canadian. We didn't have, in comparison to Costa Rica, that much family. Um, and going to school when you're a very different kid, it just, you need kind of that encouragement, especially when you're isolated sometimes. And so my mom and I would always tell each other that when we were feeling discouraged. So you can just imagine little 5-year-old me telling my mom, like, "Have I not commanded you?" And so we would always like say that. Even today, we'll continue that. And it really has helped us get through some difficult times and kind of help each other out. And it brings me a sense of encouragement, but I think now it kind of brings me a sense of like love and, that bond that we have. And so that's what I really like. But another, it wouldn't per se be a verse, but it's like a theme that's throughout the Bible in many different verses, but I'll pinpoint it to one. So Isaiah 1:17. The verse talks about, "Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, and plead the case of the widow." And so that really resonated with me growing up. I'm someone that has a very high level of compassion and justice, a big justice drive. And so the ideas from these verses weren't just about kind of a personal faith or growing journey, it's really living that out, protecting and caring about the vulnerable. And so this really led me to want to help others. So, helping in homeless shelters and providing food, going overseas and helping people. And like literally, I one of my memories are, I think before I left a mission trip from Guatemala, I took off my shoes and I gave them to someone, and I just went in slippers to the airport. And so like this is just so natural to me to want to support others and help others and do that for my community. And my family is also very compassionate and loving and helping others. And so I think that really kind of resonates with me with this verse, because it's not just a command, but it's like a way of life that I found.
Right, absolutely. And what is your favorite church or house of worship memory?
And so I have three. Yeah. So I think one of my top ones would be leading the children's groups at church, whether those are like Sunday school or summer, like the summer camps, going overseas, doing that in Guatemala, Cambodia, Southeast Asia. In my own hometown, I had done that for 15 years. I really loved pouring into children, mentoring children from all ages, very young, preschool to then the middle school, high school, and now people in university. And so I always kind of loved pouring into children through this journey. Something that really impacted me when I was a child at church was I went to a youth group and they played a video from Love 146. They're an NGO, I think in the States, and they worked with children that had been trafficked. And so the video that they played at the youth group was just to raise awareness to kids and just to be like, this is happening overseas. But when I saw that video, it was of a little, it wasn't, it was more like a cartoonish, not actual people, but
Right.
it hit me enough. And it was about a story of a little girl that had a tag on her that said 146. And that was the number she was given because it matched the menu of the kids of people that you could buy
Wow.
and abuse and destroy. And I just was like, oh my God, this is happening. I need to learn more about this. I need to stop this. And so this is what pretty much has led to the start of all of the work that I've done. And from that, from watching that clip, I was able to kind of gather the community together, and we did a fundraiser for Love 146 and in my city of Ottawa. And this was before human trafficking was even a law. It wasn't even spoken about. It was one of Canada's like dirty secrets that were hidden, and no one really knew about it. No one really spoke about it, especially not politicians, law enforcement, no frontline providers even looked into it. And so this is what really started that journey. And then my third memory at church was when we had a member of parliament. She came to our church at a conference on social justice, and she spoke about human trafficking, just raising awareness for it. And this is after I had done about maybe 2 years of raising awareness and doing this myself. And I remember right after her talk, I walked right up to her and I said, I want to work for you. And I think I was like maybe just turned 18 or still
Wow.
17, one of those ages. I was super young. And she goes, I'll see you on Monday. And so I went to Parliament Hill, to our government, and I literally worked for her on the Monday. And so my CV of non-existent anything at that point, because I was just a kid, but she really let me go into my skills and what I was interested in. And so I started doing research and database work, and I was started collecting all the cases that resembled child abuse and trafficking so that she could raise them up in our House of Commons during the listening sessions. And she could say, okay, in Ottawa, we had this child was taken and this is what happened, and in Toronto this is what happened, in Winnipeg this is what happened. And we did that for many months until everyone started to realize this is a huge problem that is national, not just local, and we really need to do something about it. And that's when our first few laws came into Canada. We didn't have anything back then, and that was right at the beginning of my career for this. And through working with Member of Parliament Joyce Smith, and then later with Brad Trost, and then after with Honourable Ferson, quite a few. And now they've really continued, especially Arnold, he's really continued this fight in Parliament. They've created a group of people that now work on this, politicians that work on these, and now our social services and frontline providers can work with the government to really create these programs and support each other. Really proud of what Canada is doing right now and how it's in the last less than 15 years
Wow.
went from having this raised really for the first time to all the impacts that we're doing. And of course, we can be doing more, but I'm just really proud to see the direction that it's going in.
Right. Yeah. I'm reminded of a story here in the US, just trying to get laws on the books for child abuse in general. There was nothing. And someone, I think that she was in law enforcement or something, discovered a child who was severely physically abused and tried to bring it, but there was no laws on the book protecting them. She ended up using animal abuse, cruelty laws, which were on the books. So you can't beat a horse, you can't beat a dog, using that to then prosecute the abusing adults for this child, saying, using the argument, well, a human is a mammal, and therefore a mammal is an animal.
Mhm.
Therefore, this law would apply for this human.
Wow.
To realize this is wrong, this is bad, this needs to be made illegal, and then it became case law as a result. It's so much is just not on the books because people don't stand up and say, this is bad, this is wrong, and this is happening more than you might realize. And it just takes that person who has that drive to bring that to those in charge and say, you need to make laws to change this, to protect these people. And so bravo that you're doing that. And with that, I know that's led to your own story. And I know you work with male survivors and male trafficking survivors, including me. And so profound with your work. So obviously that was part of what drove you into this field. So what else about your story led you in this path? I mean, you're also interesting only child.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but yeah, it's always a different path that shapes you, and how we probably more relating more to adults than other children because you had to, you didn't have those siblings. And so it might have been easier for you to relate to this person that you then asked to hire you. So how did this young girl from whose family was from Costa Rica moved to Canada? You're the only first Canadian child. And how did you become this huge, wonderful advocate?
Oh, so sweet, Mike. I don't know if an only child has anything to do with it, but might have. Some research can be done. I did grow up in a very highly social justice family, and a lot of we have a lot of people that worked in NGOs and things like that. And so I think where I've gotten to isn't as much as a surprise to them because they're like, yes, of course, it makes sense. But I've always seen my family doing that, like helping others, feeding others, literally like collecting items that we don't no longer use and donating them. That was just a very common practice, and it's continued today. We really love to love on those around us and those that we can support, and our faith journeys, that as this is command us to, but we really take that as like a personal call. And so that's always kind of been a part of my journey. And then the Love 146 video really just showed me to my face what was happening to children around the world. And I was just so shocked by that I remember one day I asked my mom if I could go to an orphanage. I think I was like 16, and we don't have those in like where I lived. I knew we had them in Costa Rica. And so I was like, can I go to an orphanage? My mom was like, why do you want to go to an orphanage? And I was like, I just want to witness like what it's like and what it is, and get to know the kids. So then when I went to Costa Rica, because we tried to do an annual trip there, I got connected to Casa de Pan. So it's House of Bread orphanage. This orphanage began in such a unique way. It was actually a woman who had given birth to her son, and the person next to her had left their child. And she said, if by the end of my time in the hospital, no one comes for that child, I will also take them home.
Wow.
And so that's what she did. And then went out, and like people knew. So then later on, she would just get kids dropped off at her doorstep and she would just take them in. And that just kept happening to the point where she decided to really run, like in her home, run this orphanage of children that would just be abandoned or neglected or literally just dropped off in cardboard boxes at her front door. And so this then became a really beautiful place where volunteers like myself would go, we would see, and people would donate. And so it's become like now they have a lot of land and a huge house and like room for everyone. And they don't kick them out at 18, which is like a very typical thing for other orphanages, especially run by the state. And so this way they can really kind of allow them to grow as a family, help each other out, help for school, and then children actually that have grown up and they don't even age out. They just, if they want, they can get supported to get married, or and some of them come back to help the other kids. And so it's really turned into this amazing thing. But when I had gone and I had met these children and heard their stories, and I remember there was this one little girl named Anita, and I think she was 3 when I met her. She was dropped off in a box with like cigarette burns everywhere and broken bones. And so she had a lot of these things just keeping her intact and helping her heal. She eventually was able to get surgery. And so I would see her every year after that. And so I remember by the time I think she was like 7 or 8, she would beat me in races and she was so fast. And so just seeing her little healing journey and like the love that she had, and whenever I would come to Casa de Pan, just all the kids like running and things like that. And I would always ask the woman that runs the place, I said, what would you need? And so she would tell me in advance. And then coming from Canada with like I probably should have brought some things for me so I could wear it during my trip, but like all my luggage would just be gifts for these children
Right.
and school supplies and food and things like that that I would get back there. But
Then you can buy clothes when you're there and bring them
yeah,
back home. So
exactly,
yeah, that works.
exactly.
You're right. Yes.
And so I loved on these children and getting to know their stories. And I remember I told myself that I want to help children like Anita and these kids, and I don't want this to happen to any other kids because it just like it's just awful. It's just horrible if this happens. And so I think as this was happening and I was learning more about human trafficking, it's like when child abuse and traffic, because it's so intertwined most of the time. And so I really saw kind of both, and it just kept a fire burning in me. And I really think this was, partly my faith and a direction that was opened for me, because the doors that opened afterwards, like I don't know if it was me or if it just, like for me it was divine intervention. A lot of these doors opening, like having a member of parliament come to my church and speak, and I walk up to her and she goes, I'll see you on Monday. Like that doesn't happen. And so just having these amazing opportunities really kept opening those doors. And as I was in university, I kept looking into this and studying this. And during my summer holiday time, I would go abroad and do these volunteer trips. And I remember I did a humanitarian aid trip over in Cambodia and actually was able to meet real victims of trafficking and speak with them, and see some that were going through healing journeys and some that were just starting, children, women, like all ages, and really seeing what that looked like. And I had met a professor who mentioned you should do a degree in human security, and I had no idea that this was a thing. And
What does
so
that even mean? A
yeah, what does
human
it even
security? And I
mean?
saw that in your profile. It's like, what does that mean? It's like
Yeah.
I'm thinking TSA agent. That's the only thing I can connect to that. So what does that mean? Is that a Canadian thing, or is that other colleges or universities have that as well?
So, the typical way to see security would be national security. It's defending the interests and the security interests of that state, of that nation, and everything to protect that nation or state from threats. And so, in that point of view, you would see people as threats. So, for example, a victim of trafficking brought into your country is seen as a security threat. Whereas if you see it in a human security lens, you see that person as an individual, as a person with human rights and dignity and that needs respect. And for us to support them through the journey of helping them out of that situation and seeing them as a victim and not as a state threat. And so this is kind of the basis of it. And I think that's what I ended up loving with my degree because it really brought the humanity back into international security and national security, and not seeing individuals that are in these horrible situations as perpetrators or as the cause for harm, but as the real victims that they were, and the help that they needed to get but weren't getting because they were being seen in a different type of a lens. And so this is, he mentioned it, I looked it up, and I was like, this fits perfectly with
Ah,
what I wanted to do. And so then I signed up to a university called Royal Roads in Canada. This is actually where X-Men was filmed, where they did I think it's called Xavier's School for the Gifted. It's like the superhero
right, of
school.
course,
Yeah.
yes.
Or her Deadpool, like,
Right,
it's all
yeah,
filmed, it's
the whole
filmed
X-Men
there.
universe, which,
Yeah.
yeah, they're bringing it all back with the Marvel. I'm a huge Marvel fan, by the way.
Yeah.
They're bringing it all back for the Marvel's Doomsday, and
Mhm.
Disney got the rights back for the X-Men because it was Fox, and they bought out Fox, so they inherited the X-Men universe and the filming rights and so forth, which they had sold off to
Mhm.
Fox back in the day. So yeah, they have a teaser trailer already a few weeks
Mhm.
ago. Same mansion, at least I'm sure it's interior shot of a studio or something, but yeah, those exterior shots. Yeah, this huge
Yeah.
mansion. Yes.
So it was amazing seeing my campus and then being like, I'm training to be a superhero."
Yes, and you
The
are.
little
You
nerd that I
are.
am.
Yes, because you are helping so many and literally saving so many just
Oh,
by educating and sharing your knowledge and advocacy. Absolutely, yes, you are a
yeah.
superhero.
No.
So take the pose,
Yeah.
superhero pose. There you go. Yes, because you totally are.
Oh, you're too
Absolutely.
sweet. You're too sweet. And I'm so thankful that my university was on board with doing a research project like this. It took a long time to get it approved, to have the research approved, just to go through the ethics board. It took 2 years because they
Wow.
needed to make sure that was no one's going to be harmed, that all the questions were above board, that I was completely trained up. Like, this took a long time in preparation, and during that preparation, I really went out and networked, and I specifically picked the exact people on my team that I wanted. So, for example, I know you've had on your podcast Dr. Glenn Miles.
Yes.
Absolutely
And
phenomenal.
we talked about you on that podcast too. Yes, yes, you were a topic of conversation on that episode. Yes.
I had followed his research since the Love 146 video because he had been doing the research with them. And watching his methodologies, which are so trauma informed and so community based and so giving dignity and respect to those who he interviewed, I was like, I want him. He is exactly who I want. So I reached out to him and I was like, you don't know me, but I'm one of your biggest fans.
Oh,
And so especially the research community, and he was down, and so he became one of my supervisors. I was so thankful for that. And then I had another named Dr. Michel, and he is located in Geneva, and he is an individual who goes to the United Nations and to many other conferences around the world with the Order of Malta, and he's a representative on the topic of human trafficking and things like that as well. So another individual that is just very, like, highly focused and determined to support these topics, and the heart in both of those men are just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I was so lucky and thankful to have had them. And so for my thesis, it was very interesting because I actually started the idea of it to focus on girls, women and girls. And that was the beginning of when I started putting something together. I thought I was going to be in Southeast Asia interviewing women and girls over there. And so when I had spoken to my key points of contact in in law enforcement, and RCMP, and Parliament Hill, and the research community, I said, what do you want? I'm going to be doing a research project on women and girls. And they were like, actually, we have enough research on that. And I was like, okay. What do I do now? And so I asked them, I said, what would you want? And so the thing that everyone kept bringing up was, we have nothing on men and boys. We have no idea about male victimization. And in my head, which I talk about in my thesis, is this an internal bias that we have of like, men are victims? What do you mean? And so I had to go through that personally and realize that I even had a bias and this extreme feminist like front, and realize, okay, if I want to do research on this, I'm going to throw myself into it and really be open to it. And if a fact is there and it changes my mind, then I will completely change my opinion and be very open to it. And so when I started making those networks, especially with malesurvivor.org, absolutely phenomenal.
Right.
They reviewed my research and my questions, and then they allowed me to have a post up.
Right.
So
And they
people,
rarely allow researchers in, because there's been so many
yeah,
people that it turns to be exploitative
yeah,
and not caring, and they don't have the back. So it's like some, trying to do a master's, trying to write or a research paper for a term paper or whatever, and doesn't necessarily go anywhere. And so they are extremely protective
yeah,
of their
it's good.
people, and they rarely let anyone in to do research. So the fact that they let you in, you must have been very convincing. And they said, we have vetted her, and
like a year.
we believe she has our best interests in heart. So, and we rarely allow people to do this, but yes, if you don't have to, but if you're willing to speak with her, we trust. She's given us plenty of evidence to show that, yes, she's trustworthy and so forth. So yes, you made it through, and that's a very, very rare spot. So whatever you did, you convinced them.
Yeah, I did it. It was a big accomplishment. And their vetting processes, they ask for everything. Like, everything. It took about maybe 8 months or something like that. So I'm really glad I started that process early on. But it was absolutely phenomenal working with them and having to support this. And I remember thinking like, oh, am I even gonna like talk to one person? I wonder how many like would even be interested. And I remember the first person that reached out, because I think they were vetting it for everyone else. Like, I think someone was sent and they were like, check her out. Like, what is she doing? What did she say? And so like this individual like was sent, and then they spoke with me.
Yeah, probably one of the volunteers. They've got a whole crew of volunteers that are also survivors. It's all run by survivors.
And so we had the most amazing back and forth. And this was actually when I realized, because my research was focused on, I want to know what helped and what harmed their healing journey post abuse, post trafficking, so that so the research wasn't focused on what the trauma was, so I didn't have to like make them relive that. And so I thought about like, okay, what would be afterwards? So thinking about more positive things. And then after that very first talk, and they asked me, can I share my story? And I was like, yeah, of course. Of course you can share your story if you want to. I am here to listen and to just be with you. And it was from that moment I realized I have to have this in my research. This has to be something I incorporate into just allowing the possibility, if you want to share, I'm here to listen, however long you want to take. And so my original, like, oh, it's going to be probably an hour, maybe 2, turned into minimum 3 to 4 hour sessions per person per session.
Absolutely. And multiple sessions, because once we find a safe person to tell who's willing to listen and gets it, that's a rarity for so many of us. So the fact that they say, you're good, she will listen to you, and you say, yes, please tell me your story. Really? Wow. Because those little wounded boys inside of us want the truth out. They want to get it out because they've been holding it so long. And just telling another person, even if you're not necessarily the first person told, but getting it out, knowing you get it, even though you may not have experienced the same things we did, you get it, and you're hearing from all these others, and you became a very safe place. And I know my own experience with you. I felt very safe, very cared for in the tone of the questions, just how everything was done, all the follow-up, I think we had written communication back and forth as well. And you felt very, very safe to me to share my story with. And then you got it. And then you shared it. I felt so seen when I heard my story being presented to all these people who work in the trafficking field, understanding what happens to little boys and how horrible it is. And they were believing you because you believed me. And they're going, oh my gosh, all these things happen in all these different ways that we haven't heard before because it's not how it happens to little girls. It's this whole other thing. That was so validating for me, this whole experience. So yes, you are a superhero. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry, Mike.
I know. Yeah. Okay. Yes, please continue.
No, it was just so impactful doing this journey with you and with the others.
Right.
And
So
what
how
I,
many men total did you interview? And then I believe it was 10 that you
yeah.
at least used in your research that were in the trafficking, but how many did you do in general of all the
So
CSA?
for the master, oh, for the CSA, I mean, all of them were
Well,
experienced
yeah,
CSA.
we're all CSA, but then
Yeah,
the trafficking as well, subset.
yeah. And so there was 40 men total that 40 men that all had child sexual abuse. And then I think, if I'm correct, 14 or a little bit more had trafficking stories.
Okay.
And then I also interviewed like people that worked specifically with male survivors frontline. So they had to have a certain amount of years at least. So they would have some expertise to say. A lot of them had like 7 to 30, like a lot of, so either law enforcement, psychologists, NGO workers, those that really kind of cared about the space and what they had experienced and what they saw worked. And it was very interesting because the research, I wanted it to focus on the male survivor journey and story because I wanted to make sure that that was the core voice and that the, let's say, experts, I mean they are experts, but like I wanted the male survivors to be the experts of this, and then the others like myself, the researchers, the frontline providers, their voice in there as well as experts, but not overshadowing the stories of male survivors, for example. So when I first started this research, my university actually said, why don't you only interview these frontline service providers? And I was like, no, that's not the whole point, because the whole idea is to get the voices. It would be like if some, man was doing research on, female issues and never speaking to a woman. And so I said it has to be the same when we turn it around. And so I said I want to hear these stories and I want to highlight these voices and really yeah, go ahead.
Why do you think that was? Do you think they were getting squirmy because they didn't necessarily want to hear all these stories, or what was the reasoning behind that? Do you think? That's my theory. Just hearing
No,
that from you.
so I think the university took a really big risk because either this is going to be groundbreaking foundational research or all of us were going to get sued because if I didn't do it correctly and I re-traumatize someone, that falls back on the universities. They took a real risk and they really made sure, like, okay, are you sure? Like, how's it going to go? What are you going to ask? Tell us the exact wording of every sentence and every question. This is why it took 2 years. And so then when they finally were like, okay, we can trust her. And then after the vetting of male survivor to even post it, foundation around how I did it was someone that has anxiety. I want to know everything in advance. And so I put myself in your shoes and I said, what would I want to know? And so I said, okay, I would want to know all the questions in advance. I would want to see all the consent forms in advance. I would want to know what I'm getting into, if what, like when I could pull out, how anonymizes it, what's happening. And so if you remember, I gave you this huge package all at once before you even began.
Right.
And I was like, look over it, see if you're even interested in it. I had some that said, once I reviewed, they're like, I am actually not ready for that level yet. And I totally respect it. They didn't do the research. I had some that continued and halfway through, they said, like, this is too much and I need some time. They went away and they came back months later. And so, and then we continued. And
I think the packet, I know the same thing with Men Healing. They offer retreats for male survivors, and they emphasize safety. And part of it is the extremely detailed application process where they ask you all these things and then also what all the rules are. And it was so specific on purpose because it builds this foundation of safety. And once you have that foundation of safety, it's like, then you feel safe enough to
Yeah,
share your story and allow them to come
exactly.
in. And that is exactly what you did, whether you meant it or not. Me
No,
as
it
a
meant
participant getting that packet and going, she knows what the heck I can see why they approved her. She's got her crap together. And this is like profound. And it's like, okay, all right, this seems very doable. So, yeah, you lay this foundation of
yeah,
safety. And I think that allowed us to say, you're a safe person. You want to hear this. Oh my gosh. So we could just pour out. And I think because we get so deep, especially men who are not used to that level of intimacy, it's like, yeah, we're going way too much and it's bringing up everything. And if you haven't had safe spaces to even deal with all this stuff, it's like, it's too much. I need to shove it all down for right now for my own safety, for my own healing. And then some, it's like, okay, deal with stuff a little bit more. Okay, I'm ready. Whereas others, yeah, I'm not ready, being fine with that. I wanted to ask, so all of your participants all came from Male Survivor, correct? Or did some come from
no,
outside?
no. Yeah, some came from other, like, a lot of them did come from Male Survivor. Actually, to the point where I had to tell Male Survivor, like, I would love to continue this, but this is technically just a master's degree, and I'm already like past PhD level amount of interviews. And just for that specific project, I said, um, I'm unable to take more than, because I had 70 interviews by the end. So it was a lot like that. It took like 5 years to complete. And so I had to limit it, but I let them know if anyone wanted to reach out just to tell me their story, that I would listen. And so they wouldn't be a part of the research, but they would have the, like, someone that would be there that would be willing to listen, that would just believe them from my name is Anita, you know? And so I think the main thing for me was that safety, but it was also the comfort. I really wanted, because I feel like when you bring safety and comfort together, then people can be themselves and they can open up and they feel believed and they feel like they can disclose more easily. And I really wanted to provide that. You know, some people had their stuffies and Kleenex and snacks and water bottles. They joined in from their car because their family
Stuffies,
didn't
yay.
know. Yeah, from their cars or from work or from home. And just depended on their level of comfort. And I actually remember one individual who started by saying, I'm not going to tell you my story because I don't trust you. Like, I don't trust you yet. And I was like, okay, don't worry. And 3 minutes in, he's like, okay, I trust you now.
Yeah,
And I was just like, okay, oh, I'm here for you. Like, I'm here to listen. And it's very interesting because the culture that they had come from, it was an Asian American. It's very hard to disclose in those type of cultures, and
right, right.
especially if it's familiar abuse or familiar trafficking association. And so to have had someone come in with a strict, like, I've never told anyone, I'm not going to tell you, to 3 minutes later feeling safe enough to
Yeah,
disclose, I knew that this like safety and comfort that I had started creating for people is something that I really had to look in later, so that I could inform frontline providers similar methods to do this similar thing. So when, for example, if someone comes into an NGO or a police station and they need to disclose, that that is available, that setting is available, so that they feel safe, secure, believed. And actually, that's what I'm working on now, those things. And so it really was amazing to see how that research evolved, because by the end of it, it finished, and I actually published the work that we had worked on. So from those 14, I realized that 10 had very not similar stories, but it was the family that was the abuser, which then turned into their trafficker, which then later turned into more types of trafficking. And so for that, I reached back out to the 10 and I said, do you want to continue this journey with me and do a completely different topic? So instead of focusing on healing, what helped, what didn't help, we're now looking into intrafamiliar trafficking. And that journal that was published with the Child Abuse and Neglect Journal, which was huge for them, because to have firsthand accounts, this is very rare to have in the male survivor community or in any kind of research. Firsthand accounts are so important.
right.
And that really kind of informed my next steps, which I thought I was just going to kind of end there and then just do it like a job and not go into research. But I realized all my recommendations that I was hoping other researchers or people would pick up and continue my work. I said, am I expecting to do this to this level of passion that I have and just throw that on the next generation? And I just said, I'll just do it myself. And so I literally went down my own checklist of things that I wrote in my own thesis and in the journal of things we had to do to continue this, and then just did them. And so, which led to a lot of advocacy in the conferences and raising awareness, helping co-create the first international conference on violence against men and boys, bringing those people together, supporting ECPAT International on their Global Boys Initiative, supporting that, then now supporting the RCMP in Canada. So it's kind of like our FBI, CIA.
Royal Canadian Mounted Police. If you watch When Calls the Heart, yeah, the guys in the red.
Yeah, on their horses.
Yes, on their horses. That's
show.
Yes, it's one of my wife's favorite, but that's where it started back in the day. Yes, that's their basically, well, it's not state police. I mean, it would be, I don't know what the U.S. equivalent would be. I know you're national, so I don't know. There is no U.S. equivalent because we have FBI and so forth. Maybe FBI.
It'd be kind of like that. Yeah, it'd be kind of
like that.
But
they were very in-person roles too, and it's more like marshals, U.S. marshals-ish. Maybe. It's all kind of, not a one-to-one comparison, but yes. The well-known, the Dudley Do Right, which was a cartoon when I was a boy, and yes, that he was RCMP as well. Yes, interesting.
So yeah, I love to go back to my country and train my law enforcement and frontline service providers on how to identify and support male survivors that come in a trauma-informed way. And so when they're doing their investigations or interviews, that's like a key thing that I'm trying to do now in the next few years of my life. And it's been incredible seeing the journey of male survivors just in the last 10 years. Like, it was very rarely spoken of, not much attention, not much media, not many programs. And then we see where it's come to today. And I have like law enforcement that are asking, we want to be trained because we want to take these disclosures and we want to be that safe person for these men and for these boys or male identifying, and we want to provide that safe space. We want them to know that they can get support and help. And it's this complete mindset change of before, males aren't believed and don't disclose and be tough and, and not many services, to this completely different way in Canada where it's now they want to create that space. And it's been a real blessing to be part of that journey with my country, and hopefully in the future seeing the impact of men of all ages and boys knowing that they can get support and get help, especially earlier on. I've seen, especially in my research, I had such a wide range of individuals. From a like very young 20-year-old to, I think oldest was like under 80, just under 80. And so seeing that journey of holding the disclosure for decades and seeing what it could do to the body and all the illnesses and all the stress and the family harms that it could cause and the lack of the isolation that comes with that. And then finally disclosing and kind of feeling free, but wishing they had disclosed earlier. And then hearing the stories of the boys that disclosed either in their childhood or their early 20s. And then seeing the journey that they're on now, which is like, some of them became like doctors and ER doctors so that they could be the first one to identify it in other little boys, or lawyers or authors. And so and then just seeing them now not hold that trauma anymore, but using that to drive them towards this bigger purpose to help others. And that was kind of the core of my research that everyone kept going back to. It was, this might be hard to do right now and to share and to remind myself and to go through, but I'm helping the next generation. Right. And I'm helping others through this. And we kept all going back to that. And for any student, it's hard to do research for that long and you get tired. But what would keep bringing me is like, I have to give this back to that community. Like, this is theirs, and it's my responsibility to get all their stories, put it together in a way that makes that brings light to it, but also empowers them and
Right.
gives that back.
And this has been part 1 of my interview with Ena Lucia Mariaca Pacheco. Join me next week for part 2 as we continue learning more about all the information she has found in her research.
We'd like to learn more about my coaching with Polar Live Consulting, where I provide one-on-one coaching and group coaching, both with a focus on healing for male survivors. Reach out to me at polarliveconsulting.com. That is Polar spelled Polar. I would love to hear from you. I want to hear your story. If you would like your story featured on this podcast, contact me via my website. If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find me, and I really want to spread this message of healing and hope to others. And remember, you are not alone. Healing is possible, and the abuse was not your fault. Let me repeat that. The abuse was not your fault. See you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast.